I have to admit, this isn't something that I was ever expecting. As a matter of fact, it seemed like from the very beginning, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens were very motivated to get a contract extension done. And this isn't necessarily to say that that won't happen at this point, but it seems like what started as a very cordial negotiation is turning into the Baltimore Ravens potentially exploring the possibility of moving on from Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm not saying that's definitively going to happen. The purpose of this video is to tell you what would fuel that desire for the Baltimore Ravens. And by the end of the video, we'll give our own analysis of the situation. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications, man, because we're going hard for the Super Bowl tomorrow. We're going to be waking up early so we can get you all the news, and we're also going to bring you some recap videos towards the end of the game. Now that we get all that out of the way, work! Usually when this happens, we all make bank. PrizePicks is hooking us up for the Super Bowl with a free square from Patrick Mahomes, which means Mahomes just needs one passing yard in order for his square to convert. So all you have to do if you want to join is go to the link in the description down below, download PrizePicks, and use my promo code microphone so they can match up to $100 of your deposit. And once you're done with that, make these picks. Obviously, you should go with the Patrick Mahomes 0.5 passing yards and click more. Once you're done with that, one of my sleepers is going to be Kenneth Gainwell, who has been a monster throughout the playoffs for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he just needs to get higher than 21.5 rush yards. So we're going to click more there. And if Kenneth Gainwell gets more than 21.5 rush yards, you could 3x your money. Now, if you feel really good about this, you could also add Travis Kelce scoring 1 touchdown. And if both of these hit, you 5x your money. I play PrizePicks each and every day, and I post my picks to my story on Instagram. So make sure you're following me there if you want to see my picks on a daily basis. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? By the way, if you want to make sure you're up to date with my latest PrizePick entries, follow me on Instagram because we're going to be going really hard on that for the Super Bowl. But for those of you guys that don't know what's going on with Lamar Jackson, allow me to fill you in. Last offseason, Lamar Jackson was locked into contract negotiations with the Baltimore Ravens, and it was seen as a very cordial discussion between the two parties. Yes, there were some parts about it that were fairly unorthodox, like Lamar Jackson was representing himself, but for the most part, he was strictly about football when time came to talk about football. But there was one thing that completely ruined everything for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. One little incident that caused something that would be fairly routine and fairly simplistic to become one of the most complex contract negotiations in NFL history. And it's not even anything to do with Lamar Jackson. It has nothing to do with the man that is being paid most annually, which is Aaron Rodgers, or the second highest paid quarterback in Russell Wilson. Hell, I don't even think it has anything to do with the third highest paid quarterback, which is Kyler Murray. The man that complicated everything for the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson is none other than Deshaun Watson. So if you guys remember, Deshaun Watson originally got a huge contract extension while he was still at the Houston Texans. When this was the same summer that Patrick Mahomes got his contract extension. This was supposed to be fairly simplistic. Patrick Mahomes clearly deserved to reset the market, and Deshaun Watson got paid a little bit underneath that during the summer of 2020. Watson would sign a 4-year, $177.5 million contract extension with $111 million in guarantees, which was supposed to keep him under contract through the 2025 season. He would play his best season ever since being in the NFL in 2020 before all of his controversial allegations would follow. We would know what would happen with Deshaun Watson next. He would demand a trade from the Houston Texans prior to the allegations, and once the criminal charges were dropped, he decided to go shopping for a new home for himself. Well, in the very beginning, it seemed like the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers were very interested in Deshaun Watson's services. The Cleveland Browns initially offered him to join their team, but Deshaun Watson didn't really want to go there. He continued to circle around, and at the very end of it, it seemed like he was very close to signing with the Atlanta Falcons until he did a complete 180 and decided to get traded to the Cleveland Browns. Not signed, he was a trade candidate. The Cleveland Browns would trade traded 3 first-round picks in 2022, 2023, and 2024, and a third-round pick in 2023, and 4th-round picks in 2022 and 2024, and then would sign Deshaun Watson to a 5-year, $230 million contract with the Cleveland Browns. I don't see any team being successful after this type of trade goes down. I'm going to be honest. Once that cap hit starts to affect the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be very messy. They don't have a means of putting cheap talent around Deshaun Watson as well. It's a huge headache. But the point being that Deshaun Watson decided to choose the Cleveland Browns primarily because of a 5-year, $230 million contract that was fully guaranteed. If you look at all the other contracts in the NFL, even from Aaron Rodgers has $150 million guaranteed. Russell Wilson has $161 million guaranteed. Kyler Murray has $190 million guaranteed. Deshaun Watson's entire contract is fully guaranteed. And that's why the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson are still at a stalemate. Lamar Jackson's looking at Cleveland and Deshaun Watson and saying, hey, what the hell? This guy didn't even do anything for the organization. As a matter of fact, if anything, he robbed the organization at this point. You have no first-round picks. There isn't really a means of surrounding him with talent. He's getting paid a fully guaranteed contract. But me, a player that is one of the most exciting and electric quarterbacks in the history of your franchise, who's already won an MVP for this franchise, who is without a doubt a fan favorite and puts butts in the seats of your games, isn't getting paid a fully guaranteed contract. On top of that, Lamar Jackson's style of play is fairly risky. He loves to scramble. He takes hits. Lord knows what the longevity for a career like that is. I mean, just look at Cam Newton. He was out of the league way earlier than we expected. Russell Wilson struggled this past year. You're even starting to see Dak Prescott starting to not use his legs nearly as much as he once did. The point being, the longevity for a scrambling quarterback in the NFL isn't very much, so I can understand why he is seeking this. And this seems to be what has been causing the contracts to be delayed this much. And it may result in the Baltimore Ravens tagging Lamar Jackson. So what's the big deal about that? Well, it seems like if they don't come to terms on a contract, the Ravens will explore trading Lamar Jackson. So check this out. This is coming to us via Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissaro. Could the Ravens trade quarterback Lamar Jackson after he receives the franchise tag? A windfall of draft picks could tempt Baltimore to consider a deal. So I'd like to repeat myself here over and over again. The Ravens will first place a franchise tag on Lamar Jackson. So the Baltimore Ravens will place the franchise tag on QB Lamar Jackson if the two sides cannot agree to a long-term deal in the coming weeks. And there is a possibility that other teams could tempt Baltimore to trade the former NFL MVP for a windfall of draft picks, per sources. Now, I want you to bear in mind, their head coach, John Harbaugh, said that there was a 200% chance that Lamar Jackson stays in Baltimore, and general manager Eric DeCosta said that they were excited to restart negotiations even after Jackson missed the end of a second consecutive season because of injury. There was some controversy surrounding his injury, if you guys remember. There were some people that were even hypothesizing the fact that maybe Lamar Jackson doesn't want to play on an injury when he has a very good chance of potentially making it to the Super Bowl, because that could cripple the rest of his career, which even if that was the case, I don't blame him for doing that. You don't want to risk anything in this business. I mean, look at what happened to Robert Griffin III. He played through an injury. The injury got worse. He lost a chance at generational wealth, unfortunately. Although he still has a good amount of money and he has a good job right now. But you get what I'm saying. The article reiterates Lamar Jackson's desire for more fully guaranteed money, which is in line with Deshaun Watson's contract, has kept sides from striking a deal, despite Baltimore making multiple offers near the top of the QB market in key metrics. So Baltimore is probably going to Lamar Jackson and saying, yo, look, we're paying you like in between what Aaron Rodgers gets paid and like what Kyler Murray gets paid. Yeah, you might be missing like $40 million in guaranteed money, but we can't give you a fully guaranteed contract because we're not incompetent like the Cleveland Browns, and we're not nearly as desperate as the Cleveland Browns are for a quarterback. Now, check this out. If the sides don't come to terms on a long-term deal before the March 7th tag deadline, the likelihood is that Jackson stays in Baltimore. Yet there are multiple ways that Jackson could end up playing elsewhere in 2023. The Ravens could tag Jackson and explore options for a trade, with surely no shortage of suitors for one of the NFL's most dynamic talents. Jackson would effectively have veto power over his destination, since he'd need to sign the franchise tender to complete any deal, and any team giving up the level of compensation would want to work out a contract. Just think of it this way. You remember the Russell Wilson trade, where the Seattle Seahawks traded Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos last year for Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, which, by the way, both of those first-round picks turned out to be top 10 picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick in 2022 for Russell Wilson, and a 4th-round pick. That trade in of itself completely altered the trajectory of the Seattle Seahawks moving into the future. I mean, a team that was clearly trending downward not only got a ton of assets for their franchise QB that was in his mid-30s, but also got a quarterback that is cheaper. They're currently working on a contract extension with Geno Smith. Got a fresh infusion of talent, partially because they also crushed their draft this past year, and look very promising moving into the future. I mean, originally I thought after the Russell Wilson era, you were looking at a decently long rebuild for the Seahawks. Now it looks like they're just retooling at this point. The Baltimore Ravens might go down the same path. I mean, think of it this way. If the Houston Texans got that insane haul from the Cleveland Browns that included 3 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and 2 4th-round picks for Deshaun Watson, who is clearly still in his prime, what would the Baltimore Ravens get for a player like Lamar Jackson? Probably the same thing, and then they could build around a quarterback on a rookie scale contract. That's not a bad plan B. I mean, bear in mind, my entire philosophy in terms of roster construction is you don't want to pay your quarterback an exorbitant amount of money unless if you maybe have a Patrick Mahomes on your hands. It's very rare that a quarterback that is getting paid max QB money, or is getting paid within the top 3 of quarterbacks in the NFL, ends up winning a Super Bowl. Usually when they do it on their rookie scale contract, like Patrick Mahomes did. Or they do it on a very, very old max QB contract like Matthew Stafford did last year, but that was like his final year on his max QB contract, and then he got a brand new contract following it. So like that contract was perceived to be relatively cheap. Now, this doesn't mean that the Ravens are definitely pursuing this path. If the Ravens place the non-exclusive franchise tag, which is worth $32.416 million on Jackson, that would allow him to negotiate a contract with another team. If the Ravens don't match, they'd get 2 first-round picks as compensation, and Jackson would get a new home. I don't think they'll go down that path. You could get so much more for Lamar Jackson than that amount, honestly. The non-exclusive tag could also potentially allow the Ravens to keep Jackson for the long haul by letting another team negotiate the long-term deal, which Baltimore then could match. The more expensive exclusive franchise tag would prevent Jackson from negotiating with any other team. The situation has been years in the making, as Jackson, who doesn't have an agent and has his mother serving as an advisor, played for just $1.77 million in 2021 and on his $23.016 million 5th-year option in 2022. He missed 5 games in 2021, including the last 4 because of a bone bruise in his ankle, and the last 6 games this past season, including a wildcard playoff loss at Cincinnati because of what he tweeted last month was a grade 2 PCL sprain in his knee. If Jackson were to play on the tag with Baltimore in 2023, the Ravens could tag him again in 2024 and potentially a 3rd time in 2025, though a 3rd tag would be virtually cost prohibitive. That means Jackson is at least 2 years away from having the type of leverage that Kirk Cousins had to get his 3-year, $84 million fully guaranteed deal from Minnesota in 2018. Watson also had leverage last year in spite of his allegations, because the Texans allowed him to negotiate with several teams that had agreed to trade terms before Watson agreed to go to Cleveland when they ripped up his existing deal for a new guaranteed pact. It also comes at a time of transition for the Ravens, who parted ways with offensive coordinator Greg Roman after the season. Harbaugh said that Jackson would be involved in the process of selecting the next offensive coordinator, though sources say that he has not had a direct communication with any candidates. The Ravens have yet to make a hire and are interested in speaking with Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy in the coming days. If you're Eric Bieniemy, why would you go from being the offensive coordinator of the top offense in the entire NFL to the Baltimore Ravens for the same position? I mean, I guess if the money's right, why not, right? But at the end of the day, what do I think's gonna happen? I mean, anything could happen at this point. The one thing that's really fascinating about the NFL is the philosophy of building a successful team consistently is changing. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles executed executed this to perfection this past year. They had Jalen Hurts on a rookie scale contract, so they decided to trade for AJ Brown, bring in Hassan Reddick, and invest in their defense to put the best team around Jalen Hurts as humanly possible for a Super Bowl run. And I think that's the trend that the NFL is going in currently. Would you rather pay your franchise QB $50 to $55 million a year and then potentially toil away in the wild card or divisional round each and every year? Or would you rather trade that player to a team that would give you a boatload of first round picks and then start a rebuild with a significant amount of assets? I know the New York Jets would love to give up multiple first round picks for Lamar Jackson at this point. And the offensive rookie of the year was Garrett Wilson. The defensive rookie of the year was Sauce Gardner. The Jets have assets. Not to say that they'd be willing to give up those players, but they do have a tremendous amount of assets to complete any type of trade. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.